One of the more tricky things to get right inside of NATS is user credential management. You either have to go the really, really simple route where you're configuring users inside of your NATS server configuration, which can have its own problems, especially when you have a lot of NATS servers to configure and re-roll every time you want to add a user. Then you can go on the opposite side of the spectrum where you use our decentralized auth, which can be extremely powerful, but can be a little kludgy to work with, especially if you're just using the CLI tools like, NSC and NATS CLI in tandem with one another. And so one of the things we wanted to solve for inside of Synadia Cloud and Synadia Platform is we wanted to make user management, especially with decentralized auth, really, really easy to configure and mint new users with. And so today we're going to be going over all of the details of what it looks like to manage users inside of Synadia Cloud and Synadia Platform, as well as dive into the groups feature, which I think builds upon a feature of NATS that I love called signing keys for accounts that can be really, really powerful. So let's get straight into it. So I'm on the users tab inside of one of my accounts, specifically my Widget Co account, and I could see a list of my users when the JOT has been issued for that particular user, what its name is, and I can sort and filter all these however I'd like. But more importantly, I can easily just create new users out of thin air. Maybe I want to create a user called, I don't know, Bob. Or actually like math service. Maybe I want to create a microservice all around math. And I can add tags to this math service. This could be just for my own identification. This gets embedded directly onto the JOT. But I could also use this for when I end up using scoped signing keys. And if you haven't seen my episode on using scoped signing keys, you could look at it here. But I could also just use key value pairs like, let's just say like org or team devx as an example, and that would add a team devx tag to that particular NATS user, and I could actually use that in the scoped signing key as a template. So I could do all kinds of really fun stuff like that. I can also set permissions, and permissions inside of NATS, they're really generally pretty simple. If I don't add any permissions, it's going to leave this completely open to publish and subscribe to anything that I'd like. But if I want to lock this down, maybe I want to say that the math service can only, subscribe to the, math dot greater than subject, I can absolutely do that, which is really, really nice. And so maybe I'll just set that as my particular permission. I can also set limits on this particular user, maybe a max amount of subscriptions or payload size, or, say whether the lifetime of the JOT, needs to be a particular amount. Maybe, this is only good for 24 hours and they need to go, renew and get another one. We can manage all of that inside of Synadia Cloud, and it's actually quite nice. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this as it is right now. We'll just say every 24 hours is our JOT lifetime. We're going to only allow you to subscribe to the math.greater than subject, and we'll call you math service. So let's go ahead and hit save. And then let's go ahead and look for this math service, which is all the way down here. And I'm going to click into it. And you could see that we get a bit of an overview on this particular service. Now, because we just created this, nobody's actually subscribed to it. And so, or nobody's actually using it for their connection. So we're not going to see anything in recent activity, but we will see a little bit of, info here. The JOT lifetime set to 1 day. They're allowed to subscribe on the math subject. So pretty useful info. We also see the public key that was generated. Now, if I, for some reason need to rotate keys because it's part of my, security policy, I could rotate the actual N key right here. I can say actions, rotate N key, and it will rotate that N key for me, which is actually really quite nice. The other thing that you'll notice here is that we have a group, and groups are a really powerful construct inside of Synadia Cloud that allows you to group users into kind of logical groups, and you can kind of manage the revocation, enablement, and rotation of these keys or groups in a much better way. So maybe if you have thousands and thousands of users, you can manage these via groups instead of on an individual basis, which is actually quite nice. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take this user and I want to connect a client to it. So if I click this Get Connected button, we actually are presented with a lot of options. You can easily connect via the CLI, or consequently use this inside of a client library by downloading the credentials, and we even give you some really nice things that you can just copy paste to be able to kind of jumpstart your CLI journey. But we could also connect via MQTT by generating a bearer JWT. So typically, we have to set all of this stuff up on the JWT. We're using NSC, and it's kind of cryptic to be able to do this, but you could just connect via MQTT and a bearer jot very easily with this. And you could also use this whole bearer jot thing as a way to connect clients on the web as well. But another way to connect clients on the web is to use our HTTP gateway. So maybe you're talking with folks that just want to use the Fetch API on the web, and they want to just use the HTTP gateway, or they don't want to pull in a NATS client, they just want to use an HTTP client. They can absolutely generate a token here for the HTTP gateway inside of Synadia Cloud and start calling our HTTP gateway, which we have documented fairly well over here. So I'm going to use the CLI in this case. I'm going to go ahead and just download these credentials somewhere. I think they're in my downloads somewhere. And it looks like they're called mathservicecredentials.creds. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this. I'm going to pull it over to my terminal. And my path to credentials, I think they threw it in the downloads folder somewhere. mathservicecredentials.creds. And so this should be able to connect me to connect.ngs.global under this account and with these user credentials. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It looks like my connection's okay. And it's also switched my NATS context over to that math service, which is nice. So as I said, I'm only allowed to subscribe to the math.greater-than subject. So if I try to say something like NATS sub hello.world, I should get a permission denied. Yep, I do. But I could say sub math.greater-than, and you can see I could properly subscribe here. Now let's pop it back over to Synadia Cloud and kind of look at some more features here. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh the page. And whoops, and you could see that we have some recent activity that's popped up. We connected and then disconnected after 0 seconds. That was just the quick connect check that was made when we switched contexts. And then we connected and disconnected after 0 seconds. That was the NATS CLI, having that permission denied error. And then we finally connected, and we have stayed connected for the last 35 seconds or so using that subscribe. And so you can kind of see a little timeline of various things connecting, and it's fun that it says that NATS CLI was what connected. And you can actually change what shows up here by setting the name of the client. In our case, since we're using the NATS CLI, I could just say, I believe it's connection name, foo. Let's go ahead and see if that changed anything. I'm going to refresh the page. Yep, foo connected just now. And so you can kind of see a little bit of a timeline of how the user is connected. I can also click over here on connections, and I can get my own dedicated connection graph for this particular user, which is really nice because you might want to set things up in a way where folks really only get access to certain users, and they can look at whether or not they've connected their microservice and how many microservices are connected in their case, and they can kind of filter and search however they want there. We also have things like issuances which have to do with our HTTP gateway and more, and you can kind of just see a history of what's been issued. This is great for security audits and such. And then we can simply just edit more settings here. It's worth noting that if you edit anything in publish, subscribe, any of these things, they're going to be embedded on the jot, and you'll have to re-download those credentials in order to use them again. That's just how the decentralized auth works. But one thing that's really, really nice here is you can go into Access, and I can assign a particular person to this NATS user. And so maybe I don't want to give somebody access to all of my account or to see all the different users in my account. I really, maybe this is a team member that's managing a single microservice, and I just want to be able to invite or assign, an existing user to be able to download these credentials so they can use them in their microservice. And I can do that via the Access tab. In fact, anywhere you see an Access tab, it's going to, highlight a way for you to kind of assign a real person to a particular resource, whether that be a account or a user or even entire systems. And so that's kind of an overview of what it's like to kind of create and manage users. But let's jump into groups. So far, we've been using the default group, and that's just embedded into Synadia Cloud and Synadia Platform. But I can create new groups. Maybe we want to say, math services. Maybe we have multiple math services with multiple user credentials. And I can choose for this to be a scoped signing key, which I cover in my NATS dynamic permissions video. In this case, I can set permissions to publish and subscribe, and any users that are created in this group won't actually have their own publish and subscribe permissions, but would rather inherit from the permissions that are set here. And you can also use template functions and things like that. And that's one way to avoid the whole, hey, I changed something and now I have to hand you a new credential. The permissions are dynamically assigned, which is really, really nice. But I could also just keep a group around in case I want to manage its life cycle a bit better. So I'm going to create this math services group. And I'm going to head and go back over to users. And I'm going to take this math service that I've already deployed. I'm going to go over and click actions and just say copy. Oops. I'm going to click copy. And it's going to let me have a copy of math service. I'm just going to call this math service 2. But instead of keeping it in the default group, I'm actually just going to move it over to the math services group. There you go. And now we should have a copy of that math service somewhere. Let's go over to the next page. Math service 2, and you can see that it's part of the math services group. And so you can actually use the math services group to manage all of the users inside of that group. You can rotate keys, which is really nice because I can actually initiate a rotation, and I will actually have 2 keys, one of which is the current and new key, and the old key, which is still active. And so I might want to wait until folks migrate onto using keys that are new, and then eventually disable and then delete that key, and now I'm fully rotated. So we wanted to support, really, common modern security practices like rotation in a way that doesn't feel like it's overburdening your team at all. And so this is completely optional, but it's really, really nice to be able to have things like revocation, rotation of these keys built into the platform, so you don't have to script it or do any crazy things around it. So that kind of covers the overall, high level overview of what it looks like to manage users and groups. There are more features that we can cover, but this should get you up and running with minting new users inside of Synadia Cloud and Synadia Platform. In the next video, we're going to be going over what it looks like to manage imports and exports with the sharing tab.